Good afternoon and welcome to our TV show featuring documentaries revealing the realities behind myths using research and scholarship. I'm your host, Ergün Pırlıkovalı, and I will be with you every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You're welcome to send me your feedback at mythsandrealities.com. Turkey recognized Armenia as an independent country in 1991, together with the other newly independent former Soviet republics. However, normal diplomatic relations could not be established between the two countries for three reasons. One, Armenian efforts to have the genocide allegations recognized on an international scale. Two, Armenian statements coveting sovereign Turkish lands, as in referring to Eastern Anatolia as Western Armenia in the Armenians' Declaration of Independence. Three, Armenian aggression in Karabagh, which resulted in 28-year occupation of sovereign Azerbaijani soil, causing 1 million Azerbaijanis to be forced into exile at gunpoint. Azerbaijan liberated its lands under brutal Armenian occupation after a 6-week epic war, sparked by yet another Armenian aggression, bringing Armenia to its knees. I will cover that at another episode. For landlocked, poverty-stricken, corrupt and violent Armenia, Turkey is like the only gate that would give quick access to the West, which would stabilize Armenia's economy and improve its democracy. Its hostile relations with Turkey force Armenia to be dependent on Russia, harming its sovereignty. Armenia is the only country where Russia manages to maintain military bases. Armenia would benefit more from a normalization of the Turkiye-Armenia relations than Turkey. While official government discussions of sort were taking place through indirect channels like media, academia, and politics, mainly using press releases, some unofficial channels were experimented also. Two of the most serious steps taken to create a climate of dialogue were the creation of the Turkish-Armenian Reconciliation Commission, or TARC for short, and Viennese Armenian Turkish platform, VAT for short. I have supported and still support all efforts to create a climate of civilized dialogue between Turks and Armenians. Anything that brings contending sides together to discuss their differences must be good. But let's see how they turned out. The TARC was established on July 19th, 2001, with the participation of 6 Turkish and 4 Armenian opinion leaders. According to its published terms of reference, TARC sought to promote mutual understanding and goodwill between Turks and Armenians, and thus to improve relations between Armenia and Turkey. TARC would develop recommendations to be submitted to both governments. It would support collaborative Track 2 activities in the fields of business, tourism, culture, education and research, environment, media, and confidence building. It would secure expertise based on project requirements and may include specialists on historical, psychological, and legal matters. The TARC members did not have official duties or titles. Extensive debates, both in Armenia and in the diaspora, revealed that the Armenian view of the TARC was generally a negative one. The harshest criticism came from ANCA, which is one of the Armenian Revolutionary Federation organizations in the USA. ARF stated in its 1892 party program that it would use terrorism as a tool to achieve its goals. ARF members have been behind the Armenian terrorism of 1970s and 1980s. ARF members, all Armenian ultranationalists, also called Dashnaks, described the TARC as an initiative of unauthorized persons ordered by foreigners which would not serve Armenian interests. For them, Turkish recognition of the alleged Armenian genocide was a precondition for any talks. Unlike the ANCA, the Armenian Assembly of America, or AAA, expressed support for the TARC. Creation of such a commission sharpened the rivalry between the ANCA and the AAA. The two US-based big Armenian organizations, the US State Department had expressed support for the TARC initiative. The European Parliament highlighted the importance of dialogue started by the TARC while making no reference to the alleged Armenian genocide in its report on Turkey. The Armenian Foreign Ministry declared that they had nothing to do with the creation of the TARC and that the TARC activities could not replace official talks between governments. Even then, 10 political parties in Armenia issued a joint communiqué denouncing the TARC. This declaration impacted the Armenian Foreign Ministry's views on the TARC as they renewed its statement and stressed that TARC could derail no Armenian authorities in the path of winning international recognition of the genocide. Another Armenian criticism was the TARC's composition, 4 Armenians and 6 Turks. Also, they said that the Turkish members of the TARC were hardliners. Creation of TARC did not cause as much excitement among the Turks, as the Turks had a positive reaction to the establishment of a Turkish-Armenian dialogue. Turks saw that as a step in the right direction to ease tensions between the two countries. Turkish Armenians also considered TARC a positive step, expressing the feeling that the Western countries were exploiting the Armenian problem to obtain concessions from Turkey. The TARC was ill-advised to seek the legal opinion of International Center for Transitional Justice, or ICTJ for short, a non-governmental organization, on whether the UN Convention for the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide that took effect in 1951 could be applied retroactively to the incidents that had occurred in the early 20th century. Armenian participants took it upon themselves to ask the ICTJ to write a report. ICTJ report relied on discredited material like the Memoirs of Morgenthau, which were contradicted by Morgenthau's own archives. Because of these anomalies, the authors probably felt embarrassed to affix their names on the February 2003 report, which remains anonymous. ICTJ issued its report saying that the convention cannot be implemented retroactively. It stressed that since the convention is not retroactive, no claims could be made based on Armenian allegations. Now, if this ICTJ stopped there, they would have been impartial, honest, and fair, but they did not. ICTJ added language to the effect that if genocide law was in force then, it would probably be called genocide because the definition fits the acts. What legal scholar in the world could accept an illegal and hypothetical stand like that? The argument supporting of the Armenian stance was not based on any scientific research, study, or evidence. This partisan stand that poisoned the dialogue climate was one of the major reasons why the TARC disintegrated. The ICTJ selectively focused on Armenian arguments and failed to pay scholarly attention to the Turkish ones. Another reason was how the Armenians constantly chose to direct their attention toward winning international recognition for their genocide claims, rather than scholarly and honestly debating the archival documents in front of them. Armenians also refer to the so-called the International Association of Genocide Scholars, or IAGS for short, an impartial source on the Turkish-Armenian conflict. This is like saying KKK is an impartial source on African-American history, or that the Nazis are impartial source on Jewish history. Established by a group of people prodded by the Armenian lobby, propaganda and finance, some of them do not even have any degrees on history, international law, or political science. Case in point, past IAGS chairman Israel Charny, who is a former professor of psychology. IAGS even found it appropriate to publish a review essay by Taner Akçam on Gunther Lewis' The Armenian Massacre in Ottoman Turkey book. That review was replete with errors, omissions, deliberate distortions, and mistranslations. Looking back, one can see that Ankara has since 2004 supported the Vienna platform, which in 2009 published a large compilation of documents. That book provided a positive contribution and a new platform where the Turkish-Armenian issues can be explored on a more equal footing. Armenians left the table after the first round of exchange of documents using feeble excuses. In 2005, the Turkish government proposed to create a joint commission of historians to the Armenian government, which in Armenia refused. In 2009, the Turko-Armenian protocols signed in Geneva included the formation of a joint commission of historians, but the Armenian Supreme Court refused, arguing that since the Turkish-Armenian protocols did not contain any refutation of genocide, they were in line with the accepted norms in Armenia and related article in the Armenian Declaration of Independence. Consequently, the veracity of genocide cannot be debated, and a joint commission of the historians cannot be accepted. Professor Justin McCarthy was asked by the Turkish Forum to provide an analysis of the ICTJ statement. McCarthy opined that those who read the ICTJ has decided that the Turks committed genocide will seldom read the quasi-legal document produced by ICTJ. I quote, "Often they will not even know that there's a UN Genocide Convention. Instead, their prejudices will be reinforced, their knowledge will not be increased. They will blame the Turks without knowing anything of the real history of events. When the Armenian nationalists killed the Muslims of Van, was that not a genocide? When they rounded up the villagers around Van, herded them into the great natural bowl in Zeve, then killed them there, was that not genocide? Was the Armenian murder of the innocent and unarmed Muslims of Erzurum, Erzincan, Terjan, and so many other places not genocide?" The ICTJ authors completely adopted the Armenian nationalists' view of history, unquote. Then there's this extremely troubling facet to the ICTJ analysis. They state, "This memorandum is a legal, not a factual or historical analysis," unquote. How, one might ask, can one decide on events of, say, World War I without an historical analysis? McCarthy adds, quote, "Of course, ICTJ does make an historical analysis, but using selective sources. While a number of what may be called the standard works of Armenian cause are cited, only one brief book published by the Turkish government and some government websites are cited, thus reinforcing the erroneous view that only Turkish government objects to the Armenian version of history." Reading the text, it is obvious that the authors completely adopted the Armenian nationalist view of history. They do not seem to have attempted to consider the other side, unquote. If one only utilizes the fabrications in sources such as the Bryce Report or the missionary reports, then genocide is a foregone conclusion. Those books contain few dead Turks. The only suffering mentioned is Armenian suffering. Using only such sources results in a complete distortion of history. World War I propaganda becomes modern propaganda, dressed in a legalistic package. The prominent Turkish diplomat and legal scholar Gunduz Aktan, a member of TARC, was also asked to interpret the ICTJ document. Aktan wrote an article titled "Armenians Perpetuated Deceitful Arguments," dissecting it. The weakest point of the reply given by the ICTJ to an unasked question was hypothesizing that if the Genocide Convention were to be applied retroactively, the Armenian incidents could have been considered a genocide, unquote. At the end of the second paragraph of Convention is the phrase, as such. That phrase is highly important on issues pertaining to genocide claims because in that paragraph, that particular phrase, as such, means annihilation of a given group merely because of its identity. Those who would like to have more information on this issue can read pages 245 to 255 of the book Genocide in International Law by William Shabas. According to that phrase, genocide is the killing of the members of a group not because of what they have done, but merely because they are members of that group. The legal study made by the ICTJ distorts these facts, unquote. Aktan added that the Armenians believe that the Turks had so grossly victimized them that they think that the Armenians are entitled to engage in any kind of fraud in self-defense. Moderator Phillips should have acted with this awareness. He did not. He did not know about the Armenian incidents and had not even read the convention. When Aktan asked Phillips why he had not studied these subjects, he replied, well, if he studied those subjects, he might have been biased. However, his ignorance did not make him more impartial. The TARC efforts for launching a dialogue between Yerevan and Ankara failed in 2001. The TARC process had to be stopped as the Armenian ultra-nationalists like Anka in this country have never welcomed the reconciliation process. A valuable opportunity wasted by the aggressive Armenian diaspora had inspired the formation of a new platform in 2003, the Viennese Armenian Turkish platform, or VAT for short, or VAT. In a scholarly article by another legal scholar, Pulat Tacar, and historian Maxime Gauin, titled State, Identity, Continuity and Responsibility, published in the European Journal of International Law, August 2012 issue, in response to an Armenian writer's wild claims, Tacar and Gauin said this, I quote, "The Armenian question is especially sensitive among other reasons because of the long accumulation of prejudices against Turks, Armenians in Armenian terrorism in 1973-1991 period, the Armenian invasion and occupation of Western Azerbaijan since 1992, and more recently, the virulent anti-Turkish stance of Anders Breivik in his manifesto and the various campaigns of attacks by the Armenian nationalists. Instead of easing the tensions, the Armenian writer's article fuels them through the provocative, defaming, and irredentist remarks of its authors, unquote. The writers stated their objective as restoring much-needed understanding through a fair and reconciliatory dialogue between the Armenian and Turkish people and all interested parties, including scholars. They supported initiatives for dialogue between the antagonists and protagonists. Tacar and Gauin focused mainly on the international law aspects of the Turkish-Armenian conflict surrounding the 1915 events and why Turkey does not qualify them as genocide. They stressed that the term genocide is a legal term describing a crime specifically defined by the 1948 Genocide Convention. The existence of the crime of genocide can be legally determined only by the judges of a competent tribunal on the basis of due process and after a fair and impartial trial. The Genocide Convention does not allow for convictions, beliefs, political resolutions, opinions of scholars, leaflets, pamphleteers, politicians, or others. Some historians, sociologists, and even political scientists tend to describe almost any incident involving a significant number of dead as genocide. Such people created an Armenian taboo, and now they were prisoners of it. Special intent, dolus specialis, must be proven before a genocide verdict. The objective element of a crime, the guilty act, or actus reus, is not sufficient. The subjective or mental element, mens rea, must also be proven. This was never done in the alleged Armenian case. The crucial aspect of the crime of genocide has been underlined by the International Court of Justice, ICJ, in paragraph 187 of its judgment in Bosnia-Herzegovina versus Serbia and Montenegro. The ICJ examined the allegations by Bosnia and Herzegovina and conducted long and detailed investigations. The ICJ found that massive killings throughout Bosnia and Herzegovina were perpetrated during the conflict. However, only in the case of Srebrenica, the ICJ was convinced that those killings were accompanied by specific intent on the part of the perpetrators to destroy the group of Bosnian Muslims as such, in whole or in part. The cases of civil war, rebellion, or mutual killings should not be confused with the crime of genocide. This is what the Armenian scholars do not wish to understand. Among other general principles of international criminal law that apply to the alleged Armenian genocide, Tacar and Gauin mentioned these. 1. Nulla crimen sine lege and nulla poena sine lege. This is a Latin phrase, means no crime shall exist without law, and no person shall be punished without a law. Genocide was not a law in existence in 1915, and no law can be retroactive. And 2. Ne bis in idem, meaning no person shall be tried for crimes for which the person has already been convicted or acquitted by a competent court. The Turkish government and the great majority of Turks do not deny that Ottoman Armenians, together with Muslims and other Ottoman citizens, were the subject of a great tragedy, that they lost their lives, property, families, and homes during the Teraset, or temporary resettlement, within the borders of the Ottoman territory. A number of military personnel or civil servants and other members of the population committed crimes despite orders being given by the Ottoman government to protect the lives and property of the displaced Armenians. The perpetrators were court-martialed in 1916 by the Ottoman government, and more than 20 Muslims were sentenced to death for crimes against Ottoman Armenians and executed for such crimes. Pulat and Gauin write that following a report by Talat Pasha, the Ottoman government created 3 commissions to investigate the complaints of Armenians. In March-April 1916, 1,673 Muslims, including soldiers, policemen, and mayors, were remanded to courts-martial. 67 were sentenced to death, 524 were sentenced to jail, and 68 received other punishments. The rest were not sentenced. There is more, but I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you for joining me. We will explore the Viennese Armenian Turkish platform, or VAT for short, next week. See you next week.